This is another wedding plate that I'm working on, and on the outside border section here I'm working on these triangle sort of kind of curved triangle sections. And so I did 2 of them. You can see kind of where this is headed, what I'm going for here. And this is a little bit different style. It's kind of a more common in like kind of Ukraine, Russia chip carving style with multi-level, where you carve down to make kind of one big facet of a chip, and then you remove more wood from that, so you end up kind of doing a double chip carve. And I'll work on that here. So again, as I've showed for old world style, which is what this is the type of knife that I used. So put the heel of that right down at the point, drive down, not as far as I normally would. I want to make this a pretty shallow chip, and I'm going to remove this whole thing. It's all going to be one chip, so as I come out I'm decreasing the angle of the blade, or not the angle but the depth. Just till I meet up there. And then do the same thing on the other side. And with old world style, I like to, instead of driving the knife perfectly vertical, I'll lean it away from the chip just a little bit, just so that it's not perfectly vertical, but once it's done you don't necessarily notice that. It looks pretty straight up and down when all said and done. So this is a big chip, so I'm not going to try to take it out all at once. I'll kind of work my way through it. And again, since I'm going to be removing more wood from inside of this chip, I want to keep it pretty shallow. I don't want to get too deep, run out of room, or just kind of make it harder on myself. And since this isn't going to be one solid chip, I don't need to be quite as concerned about making this all perfectly smooth and even as I would normally if this was just going to be one old world style chip on its own. I want to make sure that I get kind of one final pass with the blade and make it all nice and even and tidy. But with this one, it's not as big of a deal. If there's a little bit of unevenness or multiple knife marks or something. So here I'm kind of going as shallow as I can. You might notice the knife, the back of the knife, is actually hitting up against this bevel. So just trying to get that angle as shallow as I can based on that, and then follow that curvature. This is a fairly tricky part of the design to do, between the size of it and the slight curvature, that it's not perfectly straight on any of these sides. They're all 3 curved. So I have to keep all of that in mind as I go through. And again, now kind of only wanting to go as deep on this chip as I need to get, you know, a reasonably consistent angle through here. And I'm sure you've noticed I've by now removed all of the pattern lines, and I started with those lines, and that's partly there to just for the design, to understand what it's going to look like when it's done as I'm putting the design together. Partly there to remind me what this is going to look like, as you know, if there's been a while from the time I designed it to the time I'm carving it, it can be easy to forget kind of what my intention was. And then it also serves as a template as I redraw these lines of what I'm going for, because I will have to redraw those in this removed chip. So there, I was not quite careful enough. As I was pushing this way with the back of the blade, I ended up lifting some of that. Looks like it's a pretty thin amount, so I'm not too concerned. But I may end up gluing that back down at some point. And you can see with a big old world chip like this, it's kind of a lot of just back and forth and do little pieces at a time to figure out what needs to be done instead of taking it all at once or whatever. So there's, I think, a good stopping point for that chip. And then get my pencil out. And to keep things simple, I'm basically doing quarters, so I'll go half of the way from the bottom to the top on both sides, and then split that in two, split the top one in two, and then draw a curve that generally matches the base curve down here. And as those move up and they get shorter, the curve gets less apparent, less pronounced. And then same thing, going in quarters at the bottom. And then connect all of those. Just a slight curvature in these lines as well. Now I have a target. I want this line to go through those points that I already intersected. And you can tell it's not as perfect as the original pattern lines are. Looks like I missed one. So these will kind of be guidelines. I might have to make some slight adjustments as I go to kind of even them up, make sure they all intersect properly. So then just do all of these old world style chips separately. Now drive the heel down and back up just at the outside of it. Trying to make sure that this second set of driving cuts follows the same angle as the original one that I made. This can be a little bit tricky with the, again, the both, all three edges are curved, so I'm trying to make sure the knife blade in both places, the tip as it drives around the perimeter, and then also the edge as I'm drawing it across, making sure that those all line up with the target. And I found for carving old world style and using this shape of blade that it just takes a little bit of kind of playing around in practice to get a feel for how holding the knife is comfortable for different cuts and shapes, how if I want to draw it toward me or away from me, or hold it, more full grip like that, versus here I'm kind of, doing a makeshift sort of grip. Not even sure what I would call that. But for these cuts, I'm going almost completely across the grain sideways, so it doesn't really make too much of a difference which direction I move the knife, whether this way or this way. So there you have it. That's the completed multi-level old world style triangular chip.